You're listening to She's the Business podcast. Okay, so I'm here with Zerla Stoller, who is the founder of Thriving with Zerla. Welcome, Zerla. I'm so glad to have you here on the podcast today.
How are you, Jessica? It's great to be here.
Yes, yeah, really good. I'm so interested to dive into this connection with anxiety, the gut, what's going on, because I definitely have experienced some things personally with my gut in my, I'd say late 30s. Maybe I started to become aware of it, mid to late 30s to now. I'm like, wow, there's just so much I didn't even know that I didn't know. And so I'm really interested to unpack some of this and learn from you today about the connection with the gut and everything that goes on with the mind and our gut health. But before we do that, can you tell us a bit more just about your business? What is it that you actually do? Who do you help? How do you help them?
Yeah, so I'm a functional health practitioner. So my background is I work as a physician assistant. I've been a physician assistant for 18 years in the conventional space. And then I got into the functional health space after pretty much struggling with my own personal issues. So I've had anxiety for as long as I could remember. And it started off as a child and got worse as I got a little bit older. Mm-hmm. And of course, when I had a family, things got a little bit more stressful and overwhelmed. And of course, just, you start to put your health in the back burner, and my health started to decline, and I got all these mysterious symptoms. And so I was left with no answers through conventional medicine, which was actually very disappointing considering that I have been working in conventional medicine for a while. Yeah, so I just felt like I was getting sicker and sicker. There was no answers. It just left me feeling really frustrated, and it got really scary. So there was actually one incident. I was with my daughter in her room, and I was having these stroke-like symptoms. Okay, so I was having like numbness and tingling in the left side of my face, my arms, my legs, and it was followed by dizziness. And I got up, and it was like I could black out a little bit, and happened a few times. And at that moment, I'm like, okay, this has to change, or I might not ever see my daughter again. And so,
wow.
Yeah, it also has affected my health in that, you're not as present with your children that you want to be.
Yeah.
So then I started looking at other ways and how it can improve. And I started seeing a chiropractor. I went to acupuncture. There was one particular acupuncturist that really spent time with me and really taught me about nutrition. And then just simple things by changing my diet. And there was a few supplements I took. I noticed a drastic elevation in my mood. And I knew that there was something else that can be done. So through my research, I came across functional medicine. I found a functional medicine practitioner, changed my life. I got functional labs, and I found out that I had a whole lot of gut health issues, a whole lot. So I had ton of food sensitivities, probably about 56 food sensitivities ranging from moderate to severe. That's 56 moderate to severe, meaning that there was other mild food sensitivities. Something called dysbiosis, if you've ever heard of that, but it's an imbalance of gut bacteria, leaky gut, and that caused a lot of my anxiety, stress, irritability, and can cause you to be very, very overwhelmed amongst all the other symptoms that I was having. So anyway, so after healing my gut, it changed my life, and I felt like it gave me more opportunity for more things. It helped me reach my peak potential, and which is what actually started my whole business, because I was now in the right mental state, and I felt like I had a lot more room. So it opened up this opportunity that I just never knew that I could have. And what's crazy is that I'm busier than I was when I was sick, but I'm thriving more now just because I maintain my gut health.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just want to dive into that for a minute, because you boggled my mind that you had 50, was it 56?
56. I just counted 56. It too yesterday. I was like, I wonder, because I remembered it was a lot. And I'm like, I'm going to have to restrict all these foods. And it was a lot. I'm like, no wonder why. My gut was so leaky.
Yeah. How did you, That to me just sounds so overwhelming almost to have 56
Yeah.
different food intolerances. And people might be thinking, well, what on earth did you eat? Like, if you've got 56 things you need to get rid of, what was that like? Because if you get all that information in one go, obviously you've got the information, which is fantastic, which means that you know what to avoid. But then how much of a challenge was that? Can you talk a little bit about what was that change, that process that you had to go through in order to be able to heal your gut?
Heal your gut. So yeah, with food sensitivities, the thing that I don't want people doing is to look at a food sensitivity report and say, I can't eat these foods, and then you eliminate everything. That's probably the worst thing that you can do for yourself, because now you're going to be lacking the nutrients that you actually need to heal your gut. Okay. So the best way to do it is I always recommend getting rid of the high sensitivity trigger foods. Things like sugar and gluten and dairy. Those are the big ones. To get rid of the high sensitivity trigger foods, and then the other foods, because some of the high sensitivity, or some of the foods that I was sensitive to, were actually all the vegetables. Yeah, they were fruits and vegetables, and you don't want to not eat that. So what you do is you rotate it in your diet probably every 3 to 4 days. So you're not, so you're just not eating it every day.
So you can kind of have enough that your body can then cope with,
right? But that's not in your system long enough, right? So it's not in your system long enough to have a response.
Yes.
Right.
Now, something that I'm interested in, because, as I mentioned, I only really became aware that I had some sensitivities. I think it was after I had my first child. And then I started to be like, oh, actually, I think that I noticed some things. I'm trying to remember when it was. It might have been before I had my first child, but it was in my 30s. Like I'd been, I'd lived through a fair amount of years eating whatever I wanted, having nothing that I couldn't have. And then, I think a friend had said something, and I'd tried cutting out gluten or wheat. And it was weird because it wasn't so much the gut that I noticed, but it was these other sort of symptoms on my body, where I used to always have these like bumpy knees and bumps on my arms, on my upper arms. Yeah. And I cut that out, they disappeared. And I was like, Mom, did you never even notice or think it was weird that I had these bumpy knees? I was sort of asking these questions of my mum, because I'm like, that's not really normal. But because I'd grown up with it, always having it, I'd never really thought about it. And it was just something I found out by accident, right? But then it was like, wow, there's all these other, I've become more present to that. My gut's actually got less tolerant to lots of foods, into my 40s. Now there are certain things I used to have heaps of and have no trouble. And now I'm like, I kind of don't feel very comfortable after I've eaten, that. And I'm just interested, do people develop them, and is this caused by, stress, anxiety, what causes
stress and anxiety?
Are they causing the gut sensitivity, or does the gut sensitivity?
Yeah, the gut sensitivities, it's usually, when you have a lot of gut sensitivities like that, it's usually caused by something else going on. You can have a hyperimmune response, there's probably something going on in your gut, usually caused by stress, right? So there's stress, there's toxins, there's change in hormones, right? So like a lot of women tend to find changes in their gut after, a pregnancy, right? Like as you get older in life, then you notice that there's just a lot of changes in your body, and it alters your gut microbiome, and it just leads to more food sensitivities.
Yeah. So do we just become more sensitive to food, and then that's how we have to live our life going forward? Or is there a way to kind of heal it and to then be able to have more things again? Like, is there just sort of like a period of healing?
In that case, like if you go through a trial and say, okay, I'm going to do an elimination diet and I'm going to remove these things, and you feel great, but as soon as you reintroduce it, your symptoms come back. I mean, it's really important to really get to the root of it, right? Like what is causing it? So I always recommend, advanced functional lab testing. The advanced functional lab testing gives you a more in-depth insight as to like what's really going on in the body. You can even find imbalances that are not found in your conventional labs. So you may even have
Wow.
imbalances that might be there 10 years before a diagnosis is made, which we tend to see a lot. And that's why people have symptoms, right? Have you done that before where you have symptoms, you go to your doctor's office and they tell you like, everything's normal, and that
Yeah.
was in my case. I had like my labs were normal. They sent me to a specialist. I had like diagnostic tests done, all of which were normal. So I'm like, that's so strange because I
Mm,
feel really lousy. And
mm,
so, yeah, so advanced functional, lab testing is the best way to go because that's really, if you want to get to the root of it, you have to
yeah.
heal that first. And then your
Yeah.
sensitivities improve.
And so, do you like? I know that things are obviously different in different, countries and things like that. But I feel like there is a similarity depending on what you go to your general GP for versus like, do you need to go and find somebody who does this in order to get these type of tests?
Do you have to go to someone's?
Does someone other than your GP, like,
Oh
you go to your
yeah. I mean,
GP, you normally
those
get.
functional lab testing are usually not provided by your general practitioner. And most of the time they've never heard of functional medicine at all.
Yeah.
So I've spoken with some of the doctors and the other practitioners at my work and my conventional job, and some of them's never heard of functional medicine. If I show them a lab, they don't know how to interpret it. So you have to go to someone who's certified in functional medicine. You can also see a naturopathic doctor. Yeah, some of the chiropractors, acupuncturists, different practitioners, they do it. They just have to be certified in functional medicine.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
this is such an important thing because you can go and ask for answers, and sometimes you don't get the answer in the place that you've
right,
gone to, right? And
right.
I definitely experienced that because my daughter, so my second child, my daughter had some severe issues with her gut. Like she had, well, it ended up being silent reflux, and they were like, "Oh yeah, babies
Um,
get reflux," and I'm like, "But that's not normal." As in, there's something causing it. It's causing her pain, like because she would just, be curled up in pain,
yeah,
and I'd be like trying to help. Her gut would be swelling, so I went on this enormous mission to try to figure out what it is that,
yeah,
she was breastfed. So I'm like, well, I've got to figure out what I'm eating that's then causing this for her. And we had quite a lot of tests done, but I think that there was like a level of test that we couldn't get to. And every test we had all the allergies.
yeah.
Everything came back, no, fine, no allergies. And I was like, well, I pretty much know I don't have allergies because I don't have a reaction when I eat the food to that
Right,
extent. But it's like, it's
right.
more of a subtle reaction, right? It's like there might be the gut just may not be digesting food as well or
Right.
whatever. But we probably haven't been in tune with to recognize that there might be something there. So you kind of just think you're normal. And
Yeah.
I interestingly had this Reiki done. So my chiropractor at the time was quite holistic and like not, I guess, not just doing the chiropractic. Like they would do kind of almost like Reiki and find where there would be things in my, they'd say like, oh, your pancreas is really like showing up today. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I ate quite a lot of sugar or,
Yeah. Yeah.
something like that was
Right.
crazy. And
Yeah.
they'd pick up stuff. Sometimes if I had a little bit too much to drink on the weekend, my liver may have been, but I never told them what I'd been doing. They would
Right.
just pick up something. And I was always like, this is freaky how accurate it was. But they
Right.
did this Reiki kind of test, I guess it is, where I bought in a whole lot of foods and they just tested whether there was an imbalance there, an intolerance there. Like, and if there was, I couldn't hold my arm up. They would push it and
Oh,
there was no
yes.
resistance.
I had that testing done too, and it was crazy because I got weakness by something that I was supposedly sensitive to that you have to hold in your hand, and then they push on that part and it's weak, and they're like, "Oh, you don't do it's just isn't that
It,
crazy how that works?"
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really blew my mind. And the weird thing was that the only thing that showed up for us was butter. And it was like not any other kind of dairy, but it was butter
Yeah.
that was like heat processed. And so
Huh.
because it was like spreadable butter. So it was like
Yeah.
actually butter, no oil or anything added, but it must have been heat processed to make it spreadable. And so
Yeah.
they were like, yeah, there must be something in this processing of the butter that is making it show up for you. And
Yeah.
that is the only answer I ever got. But I know that there's something in that. Now I'm thinking we maybe need to get some actual bloods done, like you're saying, this advanced functional labs, just to
Yeah, for
really
sure.
find out on a greater level of detail
Yeah,
what actually was going on. Because I know
yeah.
that my daughter, she's 6 now, but she still experiences some gut
Gut
issues.
issues. Was she delivered vaginally or did you have a C-section? Because that makes a difference too.
She was actually a planned
Nice.
C-section because I had an emergency one with the first child, and the
Right,
doctors were like, "You have a high risk of rupturing if you try to have the child
right,
naturally." So
right,
I don't really want to, go down that path with the word of rupturing. That doesn't sound very nice.
right,
So
right.
yeah, she was a
So,
C-section.
yeah, so supposedly, I guess. Well, I'm a C-section baby. I have a twin. My
Mhm.
twin was born vaginally. I was born C-section, and so sometimes I feel maybe that's why I had more of the mental health issues than she did, because when you're born C-section, you don't get that bacteria from the mother's vaginal canal, so now you're left without it. So
Ah,
now we are already born with our gut microbiome is already lacks that bacteria, right? And so
ah,
that's
wow.
just so you know, the gut actually produces most of the body's serotonin, like about 95% serotonin, which is the happy hormone.
Hmm.
50% of dopamine and actually produces 30 other neurotransmitters. So if you have that imbalance in your gut, which has the good and the bad bacteria, that can actually lead to anxiety if you don't have enough of those neurotransmitters. So that's why that's important. So I was asking you, like, is she
Yes,
vaginal? Because that can contribute to it as well.
that is
Yeah.
fascinating. So
Yeah.
interestingly, she is actually a super happy. She clearly has a lot of natural dopamine and serotonin. But my son, who was the
Good.
emergency Caesar, I'm like, oh, there's something to explore there. What do you see? Like, is this something that a person, you don't get a choice when you're a baby, how you end up coming out? It's just like
Right.
that's what happens. But if you then are, you're now here and you've been born through C-section and you're noticing some of these symptoms or problems, is there something you can do about it at a later point in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're not doing, let's say you want to hold off on any lab testing, I always say you gotta keep your gut bugs really, really happy.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that they're happy is you don't want to feed them anything bad. So that's again the thing that I was talking about, avoiding the trigger foods, the processed foods. You want to have a diet that is whole foods, which is foods in its natural form. Some people don't know that, but whole foods and fiber rich foods. So a lot more plant-based vegetables, fruits, whole grains, right? Those things that are helpful. Probiotics. I always encourage everyone to do probiotics. You could do that through foods like fermented foods with families. I always say, you could do a non-dairy yogurt parfait. So it's fun and that will feed their gut. Or maybe if they like kimchi, you could add a little kimchi in tacos
Mm-hmm.
or kombucha. It's kind of like juice, but you
Yeah,
can do kombucha, things like that, or maybe a probiotic. I give a probiotic vitamin to my kids in a gummy form. I do that. Those are
yeah.
things you do, of course, staying hydrated. Things that can also help your gut too is sipping on bone broth. So bone broth has glutamine, which is an amino acid that feeds the enterocytes. Enterocytes are the cells lining your gut.
Mm-hmm.
It feeds it, it provides it the energy that it needs, it helps it to grow, repair, and eating foods that also mucilaginous foods that help the mucus lining, things like chia seeds and flax seeds and okra and things like that. So eating foods that helps to support the gut, giving it fiber because that feeds it, the probiotics. And of course, the biggest thing that I always tell people to do, because no matter how good you eat, how clean you eat, how much you exercise, you need to know how to reduce stress, right? Find ways to bring the stress level down because again, no matter what you do, if your stress is not controlled, your stress puts you in a state of what we call fight or flight. And when you're in a fight or flight, it means that you're not resting and digesting, which is your parasympathetic system. And when you're not resting and digesting, you're not digesting properly. You don't get good circulation to your gut. You don't get the digestive juices or even the stomach acids that are needed to properly digest your food. So you're more susceptible now to infections,
Mm.
which, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so finding ways to resolve stress, like connecting with nature or
Yeah.
spending time with your family, the people that you love, things like that, meditation, things that make you happy, yoga,
Yeah.
right?
So when you say rest and digest, are you
Hmm.
meaning literally like after you've eaten, or don't be eating up on the run and like on the go, like
Definitely.
actually
Don't
sit
eat on the
down,
go.
eat,
Exactly.
and then rest
Mindful
afterwards?
eating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, well, the rest and digest I was talking to is because in our body we have the autonomic nervous system, right? So we have the sympathetic, which is the fight or flight, and the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest. So if you're eating on the go or you're stressed out, what happens is your fight or flight response is activated, meaning that if this is activated, then your parasympathetic is not. So you're not resting, you're not actually digesting properly.
Right. Mm.
Right. And so the food just kind of goes through and you're not absorbing nutrients, things like that. So mindful
Mm.
eating, I always recommend if you can't do it 3 times a day, because I know we're all so very busy and we always tend to eat on the go or snack when we're on the computer, just pick
Mhm.
one meal, just at least one meal to start. Whether that be your breakfast or lunch when the kids are not there and really
Yeah.
enjoy it and use all your senses to eat it.
That's so interesting because it's like you could be actually eating all the right foods, and
Right.
if you're eating on the go or you're stressed, then you potentially not actually
Exactly.
absorbing those nutrients. They're just sort of going through.
Exactly. And that's
Yeah.
that's what happened with me because I eat healthy even when I had a lot of anxiety and stress. I mean,
Mm.
I was someone who exercised all the time and I eat healthy. I eat a lot of salads. So I eat a lot of fiber. But the problem was I was eating on the go and I really didn't think about it. I didn't really give myself time. I was always stressed. And
Yeah.
so everything
Mhm.
I ate, it didn't even matter. It just went probably right through me and I still had nutrient deficiencies. So that's the most important thing. It's really stress
Mhm.
and mindful eating and eating whole foods.
I think we develop these habits and we probably don't even realize we're doing it. Like, how often do you sit
Yeah,
down to eat and you might have your phone next to you and you might be scrolling?
all
Like,
the
you're
time.
probably all the time, because how often are
All the
we ever without the
time.
phone? So it's like maybe we should leave the phone in the kitchen and
Yeah,
sit down and just actually
exactly.
sit with the food and eat it without needing some sort of stimulation.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would be such a simple one as well. Like even just
Right.
removing the phone, just remove
Yeah.
that to eat. I love that. Now, we were talking, I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, for you, it was anxiety that was like the real thing that had got you into this, what is going on, and it sent you off on the
Hmm.
path of discovery. What is the real connection between anxiety and the gut? Does the anxiety come first or does the gut come first? Which causes what?
I know. There's always that big confusion, which is first, the chicken or the egg? So
Mm,
either one, I'd have to say. So because the brain and the gut, they're connected. I mean, they're connected physically, right? You have the vagus nerve, which is one of the longest nerve in the body that physically connects the from the brainstem down to the gut. So
mhm,
it communicates kind of like a two-lane highway. It's
mhm.
bidirectional. So you could have anxiety and stress, which can influence what goes on in your gut and vice versa. You can have gut issues. So it kind of becomes like this vicious cycle, right? So it's really hard to say. Yeah, there's always that question as to what happened because, I always tell people, well, these things happen. It starts when you're born. So sometimes I always say like maybe it's your gut that starts first because you were born with that and you were given your gut microbiome, which already influences your behaviors. And then
Mm.
but then other people have life experiences like trauma. And so if you're already not in the best health, then it's easier. Anyways, it could go either way.
Yeah, yeah.
That's still a
And I
question for
can see
me.
how then they can kind of
Right,
keep on influencing each other.
right, right.
So, would you say, like, are they that connected that if you have anxiety or experience anxiety, then there will be something that's going on in the gut, or can you have
For
them
sure.
independent of each other?
There will usually be something going on in the gut, I'd have to say. I mean, because you could have the other things that causes anxiety, right? You could have metabolic issues, right? If your blood
Mhm.
sugar is not well controlled, that can cause anxiety. You could have
Mhm.
hormonal issues. If there's hormonal imbalance, that can cause anxiety. But then those hormonal issues are also caused by the gut,
Yeah.
right? So if there's something going on in the gut that causes hormonal issues, which then cause anxiety.
Socrates, or someone who said all disease starts in the gut. It was one of their, I may be
Was
misquoting it.
it?
In my head, it was Socrates, but
Yeah.
it was definitely an ancient Greek
Yeah.
philosopher who I don't even know how they knew that back then, but that's the quote.
Yeah.
All disease begins in the gut, and I'm like, wow. When I kind of
Yeah.
heard that, I thought it's really interesting. And when is that not true? I haven't yet found any real evidence for anything
Yeah.
being true to that. So I'm
Yeah.
interested if someone has an experience of it not being connected to the gut. But it's amazing how everything in our bodies
Right.
is so connected, right?
It's so connected. But yeah, I mean the
Mm-hmm.
gut, if you really address the gut, I mean it will almost heal everything else. Whatever other issues you have, whether it's skin problems, hormonal issues,
Yeah.
if you have any mental health issues, brain disorders, anything, if you really focus on the gut first, that will get rid a lot of the symptoms. And that's usually what my focus is when I work with clients. It's more of the gut. And when I say gut, it's like not just like your intestine, but it's also your liver. And
Mm-hmm.
then you can fine tune everything else
Yeah.
around it.
Yeah. I love that.
So
Which is good because in a way it means even though, as you've already kind of indicated, it can be multifaceted when we're looking at the gut and
yeah,
different things you can do and what you're eating, but it's also one thing to
yeah,
focus on. Like, is this helping my gut or is it not helping my gut? So I think it can
right.
also feel like it's a lot more simplified. Now we don't need to go off and find solutions for all these different things. You can actually just focus in on the gut and that will heal
Right.
whatever else is going on. So I love that because now we know what to do. Focus on the gut.
Yeah.
So where do you start? Like, what are the steps to support gut health?
There's like the 5 R's.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, the first thing that I always like to do is, of course, remove any triggers, right? And those
Mm-hmm.
are the things that I talked about, which is like the food sensitivities. So, high sensitivity foods that I always recommend, there's like 7 of them. You guys can all try this in an elimination diet for at least 10 days. And that would be sugar, gluten, dairy, corn, eggs, peanuts. So you just remove those common triggers, right, for about 10 days and see how your body feels. And you'll probably notice a huge difference because there's a lot of people that are not aware that they have a gluten sensitivity. Like you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to have a celiac disease to not eat gluten. Like some people just have, and I had that sensitivity. Actually, gluten was one of my biggest triggers that I found out. And as soon as I removed it, I'm like, oh my gosh, big
Yeah.
difference. Right.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
The gut, like after you eat it, and you kind of have the belly
yeah.
there. That's an instant one. But I noticed as well my ankles. I might have been holding water in my ankles, and when I stopped eating gluten,
Yes.
my ankles became slimmer.
Yes. I was
Random,
I
right?
was swollen before the gluten. I had a lot of water like swelling. And so as soon as I switched to an anti-inflammatory diet and like reduced, completely eliminated gluten, I noticed that change where I didn't have swelling and bloating. I didn't have any of those
Mm.
issues. So that's like the very first step is you want to remove anything that will irritate the gut lining. Other things too is some people like, I don't know, they just love popping pills for pain, like anti-inflammatories, right? That's a common one. Or people like my husband, he loves taking antibiotics, like he thinks it's the cure all, which I tell him it's not good, but he does it and that kills your gut microbiome. It's like a bomb that explodes in
Mm.
there. You get rid of everything and you kind of need some of that bacteria, right? It helps to protect you. So just eliminating those things like unnecessary medications, those trigger foods that might have chemicals. So I always recommend going organic if you can, just because the foods that have pesticides, right, those glyphosates, it can disrupt your gut microbiome, those things. So that's
Yeah.
the first thing is remove all of that. And then, of course, then replace is like bring back all the good stuff. So that's when you want to add in the probiotics, whether it's through food or supplementation. For women as we get older, right, we also start to have less digestive enzymes. Our stomach acids decrease, which is needed for proper digestion. And our stomach acids are like our first line of defense. It sits in our stomach. So everything that goes in
Mm.
your mouth, you already know that there's going to be some bacteria and things that go in your mouth. It goes into your stomach so that those stomach acids help to kill off some of those pathogens. So when you don't have enough of it, your food's not broken down. And then now you're introducing all these bad bugs in your body and you get an overgrowth. So you can
Mm.
replace your enzyme. Sometimes I tell my clients, you could do like a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar with your meals. You could do that, or you can take a supplement, betaine hydrochloric acid. They even have that along with digestive enzymes. I recommend that
Yeah.
to anyone as we get older. That's like one of my, I have to have it in my purse at all times. So
Digestive
those things,
enzymes.
yeah, digestive enzymes with the hydrochloric acid,
Mm-hmm.
probiotics, and then of course the
Mm.
repair that I talked about is like eating the foods that really help to soothe and repair the gut lining, like the bone broth,
Mm.
glutamine supplementation, and those foods like those mucilaginous foods I talked about, like okra and aloe. You can drink aloe. Have you tried that before? The aloe
I
drinks,
have,
actually
yeah.
pretty good. Those are good for your gut.
Okay. What about collagen? Because I
Yeah.
think there's been a huge
Yep. Collagen is great.
explosion of collagen, definitely over here,
Yes,
the last
absolutely.
couple of years. Hmm.
I do that almost every single day. I put it in my smoothie because that helps. That helps too with your gut
Yeah.
as well as everything else,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Because that was
Yeah.
what I think it was not even a lady in the chemist, but she was kind of quite into her natural health. That she was the one who actually said, definitely take the probiotics, but take collagen because if you're stressed, your gut wall will be, compromised, or it won't be
Yeah.
helping you absorb the food,
Right.
and the
Right.
collagen helps to strengthen the gut wall.
Yep.
So that was how she
hmm
sort of explained it to me. And now hearing you explain that even further, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. And it's probably because of those amino acids, right? Like
Mm,
glutamine in the bone broth. It's kind of like the stuff that you see in collagen also. So
mhm,
it really feeds that gut lining and it really
mm,
strengthens it. So yeah, I always recommend that. I love
mm.
collagen. So that's my must have.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely as we get older as well. I look for the ones that say it helps you produce your own collagen. It's not just sort of giving you a
yeah,
supplement or something to
yeah,
take right now, but there are some
yeah,
you have to look for it because there's lots of different types out there. But some of them say that it's supports production, which I'm like, that give me all of that because
yeah,
we all need more collagen.
yeah,
Keep looking
yeah,
young as long as we can.
right.
Amazing. So what is it? That's remove, replace, repair. What are the other
Yeah,
two?
remove, replace, repair. Where the other one is re-inoculate, which is
Mm-hmm.
the probiotics, and then you have like rebalance, which is pretty much your lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
right? You want to, of course, the sleep. We all know that sleep is important. You have to have that 7 to 8 hours of sleep because if like poor sleep, it affects your circadian rhythm, and
Mm-hmm.
so it'll affect your gut rhythm because our gut also has its own circadian rhythm, so it'll lead to digestive issues.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like the stress part of it, learning how to say, one of the things that I really learned with the stress that really helped my gut too is just learning how to say no, getting rid
Mm-hmm.
of toxic relationships, just things that you don't, really don't, some people don't think about,
Yeah, but
right?
they cause stress, right?
It
You
does
know,
cause stress,
have
and the stress, yeah,
mm,
it alters
mm.
your gut microbiome and affects the gut lining.
Wow.
So yeah.
So, question about this, is this obviously adults, we can take all of these five things and, you've been so helpful at explaining each of those steps. Does it work as well for kids, or are there certain things that
Oh,
kids should or
absolutely.
shouldn't do?
Absolutely. I do that with my kids too.
Amazing.
So,
And
which
if
is great.
if you're seeing a child that's experiencing anxiety, is that what you would start with? Like you'd say, right, let's
Oh
look at
yeah,
the gut and
absolutely.
then see whether that addresses.
Yes. Yeah, I always look at the gut
Mm,
and I always look at the foods first. That's always one of the first things I look at.
mhm.
It's always the big things is the dairy gluten for if you're looking at an anxious kid. It's always like, "Oh, let's remove the gluten and dairy." Because they
Yeah.
have these things that's called like what is it, gliadomorphins. It works on the like opiate receptors in the brain. So it does something, but I can't remember
Mhm.
exactly. But it's again, it's like the food, it starts with the food.
Yeah. I have a question about, you
Yeah.
mentioned corn as being one of the seven. And does that mean all
Did you
forms of
say
corn? Corn.
corn?
You
Oh,
said,
corn.
yeah, sorry, I'm not pronouncing it the same way.
Corn. Yes. No,
Corn.
corn. The reason why I mentioned corn is because it's a product that 95% is genetically modified. And so that will just affect the gut. You know,
Okay.
they are genetically modified to be its own like insecticide. So I don't recommend that.
Yeah. Is that all forms of corn, like sweet corn, as in the, as a kind of a vegetable, and then there's corn, as in corn tortillas, or
You
which
know
I
what? For
think are
me,
made from maize,
I just avoid it all.
all corn.
I just avoid all corn.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's an interesting one because that's one of the ones that I've noticed more recently. I'd drop the gluten and I'd be like, great, I can still have Mexican, and there's a lot of options there. And then I was like, no, I'm actually experiencing these weird, like my gut definitely is not enjoying this,
Oh, yeah.
and I, of course, cut out everything else first, like the FODMAP
Yeah.
foods and the beans and the this and
Yeah.
that, and not the corn. And then now I know, yes, the corn definitely affects me. I can have a little bit, like I can have, and I only ever have the plain, if it was like a plain corn chips and really, not highly processed stuff, but it
Yeah.
still was making a difference. And it's interesting because I, as a teenager, could eat an entire bag of corn chips and feel great
Right.
with a whole tub of sour cream. I
Right.
didn't do that when I was,
Right.
crazy hungry teenager mode. And well, I didn't think it ever had any effect on me. Maybe it did, but I never was aware of it back then. But
Yeah.
I'm interested in that because I don't think I've ever heard of that of being one of the top ones to cut out. But
High sensitivity.
I was
Yeah.
like, interesting because I've definitely picked that up as one of the ones I definitely need to avoid if I want to have a happy gut. I
Happy
need to
gut.
avoid the
Yes.
corn, which is a shame because I
Yes.
really like it. I love corn chips. I'm like, damn.
Yeah. It's never like forever. So let's say like you do heal your gut, right? You give it some time, you eliminate those foods. Some people have to eliminate the foods a little bit longer than others just to really allow it to heal. And
Mm-hmm.
then, but once it heals, you go through the reintroduction phase and you just try it out. You just reintroduce it. I always say at least reintroduce it for like a couple of days, wait about 4 days total, reintroducing one food at a time and see if your body responds to it, see if you develop anything. Sometimes there could be a delayed reaction. It's not always immediate. There's usually 2 to 3 days with food sensitivities. And see what happens. And then if it comes back, then wait it out another 3 months, but eventually you'll be able to eat those foods. Because that happened with me. I didn't reintroduce it actually for me until like I would reintroduce it after a year and then have symptoms, and then I'd wait a little bit longer and then reintroduce it. And now I haven't had any issues with some of those foods that I eliminated
Yeah.
before because I'm always constantly healing my gut.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's very interesting. I'm very fascinated in this. And I'm thinking like, wow, it was really easy for me when the kids were babies to really be able to give them, the right food and to eliminate whatever I needed to. So cutting out gluten, dairy when they were babies was easy. And then I don't know, just like it gets to this point now where I think, wow, if I tried to get my son to cut out gluten and dairy, I mean, I guess I could buy gluten-free bread, but then sometimes I'm always worried the gluten-free options are potentially full of all sorts of random things that
Right.
aren't necessarily that great for you either. Are you just replacing one thing with something that's,
Right.
again, highly
Exactly.
processed?
Right.
And I don't know what I'd replace it with because, he's like, he doesn't eat potato. So there's like,
Yeah.
potato's gone. What if I cut bread out, obviously pasta, there's a huge chunk of just like staples, I guess, for a kid who's turning 10.
Right.
That would be like sandwiches that go to school, toast in the morning, sometimes it's pasta. And I've always been conscious of it, but that would just be a massive upheaval of his entire diet. Do you have any tips if you were someone,
For
that
for
you're going to,
children.
Yeah, or I mean,
for
even I
children?
mean, I guess even an adult who eats a similar diet, like maybe you have toast in the morning, a sandwich at lunch.
Oh, there's
Sometimes
that
you'd
way.
have
Yeah.
pizza or pasta for dinner. There's a lot of wheat going on there, and I'm okay because I've had myself out of that for so long. But I don't know what I would even feed him if I was going to cut it out.
Yeah. Well, for me, I found a lot of replacements for gluten stuff. So, for example, I mean, I love bread, but
Mhm.
when I had to stop eating gluten, at first I tried to do the gluten-free bread, but I'm like, this is not helping because it doesn't, first of all, it doesn't really taste that great, and it's still, and then I wanted just to avoid grains altogether. But anyways,
Mhm.
so I started just finding other options. So if you're doing a toast in the morning, I would make a sweet potato toast, which for
Yeah,
kids probably would be like,
he doesn't eat
eh.
potato.
That's right, he doesn't eat potato.
Yeah, it's so
Oh.
tricky. What child does not eat potato?
Or
Like seriously.
you could just reduce it. So if he eats it daily, then maybe every third day or fourth day, so it's not the same thing, just kind of rotate his diet as much as you can. But yeah, for kids with gluten, that's kind of tricky. I wouldn't, I mean, the for pastas, I give my kids they have the gluten-free pastas, and I
Yeah.
know it's not like 100% the best, but it's at least they still can have their pasta. They have chickpea. They have pastas made out of chickpea or cauliflower or things like that. So you could do
Hmm.
those that are a little bit better options. Like the pastas are a little bit easier because they have those options.
Yeah.
Gluten breads and things like that, that's a little bit harder.
Yeah.
But as soon as they eliminate it, right? And they're like, oh, you don't eat bread, you get used to it. You don't miss it anymore after a while, you
Yes,
know?
definitely. Yeah. No, I know. I mean, it's easy for me. I think it's easy for
Yeah,
yourself because
right.
as an adult, you can make other choices, and kids. Different children are different. I think my daughter would be easier because she's so much more into variety. So I
Yeah.
could easily be like, oh, let's have this instead. Whereas my son has
Right.
the exact same thing with the exact same spread on it every single day. Like
Oh,
he doesn't
yeah.
even deviate what he spreads on his toast. It is the same.
Right.
So when you have a kid who's so like, that is just what it is, we can get him to change sometimes, but then it's whatever that new thing is, then it's the same thing every day. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't like to have all of that variety. My daughter loves variety. She would go insane if
Uh-huh.
I tried to give him the same thing every day. But it's so interesting, isn't it? Because like,
Yeah.
yeah, just finding that approach. But yes, I'm sure that there are options. It's just about being a bit more creative and finding something that is
Yeah.
kid friendly as well. I heard, and this is just a throwaway question for you as well, because one of the go-tos that I kind of went to, oats. And oats, I know some oats have gluten and some don't. And
Hmm.
these days they tend to just say, like, just avoid oats just because it's too hard to figure out which ones do or don't.
Yeah.
But I heard that oats have some compound in them that actually irritates the gut. It's almost like the molecules or whatever is in the oat. I'm probably going to call all of things the wrong name, but I'm not sure where I saw it. It was very recent. And they said there's basically like these almost
Really?
like little barbs that are sticking out of it. So
Huh.
even though oats are supposedly a health food and they're always, a
I
lot
know
of
they say whole grains, like, if you
trainers
ask,
and people, yeah,
yeah, it's supposed to be like it good because fiber and all that
yeah.
stuff. I haven't even seen that.
Ah, okay. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing. You don't just see something the first time on the internet and then take that
Hmm.
as true. Probably needs some investigating. I think it was something like leptins, or there was a word.
Are you thinking about lectins?
I don't know because again, I only just heard this once, and what I took away from it
There's
was
lectins that affect your gut. It
leptins
actually
are in oats.
affects the junctions, those tight junction in your gut, but they're called lectins that I know that they have
Yeah.
in apples. Am I getting mixed up with something? But anyways, it's called lectins. That's not good, but
Yeah,
I
it
was
could
pretty
be
sure
that.
that's
It definitely was started with L, so it might be lectins and not leptins. Anyway, there we go. There's something I probably should look into a little bit more, but that was a bit of an eye opener for me because I'd always sort of thought
yeah,
oats, this is great. You can, have a variation from the wheat and the bread and have something else, and oats are always
yeah,
so, in all of the my husband
yeah.
likes reading all the bodybuilding stuff, and he's like, we should have oats, and he just doesn't like porridge, so he's like, well, he'll have it as cereal instead. But I thought, well, if you're trying to cure your gut, that's why I brought it up. I'm like, are oats one of the kind of hidden things that we think are a healthy thing that actually can be an irritant, maybe not healthy for your gut?
It's one of those foods I definitely don't like to eat all the time, not because I don't like it, but because I try to avoid grains as much as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I am trying to do as well at the moment. So, I think, eggs eggs are one of the things to avoid. I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I going to feed my son for breakfast if you can't have all of these things? It'll just be
I mean, if you're gonna do egg, just make sure, because it's not the egg itself, but it's what the chicken eats. So whatever the chicken eats, you could be having a reaction to whatever the chicken's eating that's going into the egg. So if, get pasture raised, I always get organic pasture raised eggs instead of just getting anything. But other than that, I wouldn't eliminate it for like a long term. It's just one of those things that you can eliminate to see if if it reduces any reaction. But otherwise, it has a lot of nutrients in it.
Certainly a staple when you're trying to reduce pains.
Yeah, for sure.
Eggs are such an easy one because they're protein and easy to make as well. So that's really great. Thank you. It's this has been a very informative chat. Definitely have learned some things, and I appreciate you sharing so much with us. It's very, very generous of you.
You're welcome.
So if people want to find out a bit more about this, I guess we've opened up a can of worms here, which can be a huge can of worms. You might be like, oh my goodness, where do I start? How do I think when we start looking at the diet, if you've never done anything like this before, it could feel like this could just be too hard. If people want to reach out to you, where can they best find you?
You could best find me on Instagram at Thriving with Zerla. That's my handle.
Awesome.
I do have a freebie on there for your audience that would be really helpful since we're talking about diet. I always recommend to everyone and all my patients to start with like an anti-inflammatory diet. It's great. It helps with inflammation. It's a great place to start if you wanted to start someplace. And there's recipes in there and teach you all about it.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, link that one up in the show notes then if anybody. Okay. So it's for similar to what you're talking about with the restriction, just taking out the top inflammatory things
exactly.
and how to do it, and then giving you ideas of what you actually can eat. Yay.
Yes.
Solve that problem.
I'll have some recipes on there for you, too, and it removes all those high sensitive trigger foods.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's the main thing, isn't it? Sometimes you're like, I want to do this, but then the thinking and figuring it out just can be such a barrier because it can just make life hard. So if you've done all that hard work for us and put it in there, then that sounds amazing. So I'll definitely make sure we've got that linked, an anti-inflammatory guide for your diet. Is that correct? Yeah,
there you
brilliant.
go.
And you're on Instagram. Fantastic. We will make sure that is in the show notes as well. So drop down there and follow Zerla. Sounds like you are an absolute fountain of knowledge and so many useful things to learn from you, how to heal the gut. I just love that. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Do you have anything that you wanted to leave people with today, like any final piece of advice or, I don't know, a tip? What to do, where to start, or if they're experiencing any issues.
And where to start. I always recommend a whole foods diet.
Yeah.
I tell everyone that. I don't know. It always starts with your nutrition. So it always starts with your nutrition because everything that you put into your body, it's information, it gives instructions. So you want to make sure you nourish yourself with the right foods.
I love that. And that's, you might feel like I say this all the time, so it's not very special, but, sometimes we just need to hear that information. Yeah. It's not like we haven't heard of whole foods before, but it's like, well, that's actually where you start. Well, that is really useful because it means that you can stop searching for answers in all these other places and just go, right,
how do I... simple.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
How do I keep it simple?
Foods?
And it's cheaper than those buying processed foods. It's cheaper.
Cheaper and better in the long run as well.
Right.
Because the amount of stuff you won't need when you have healed your gut will be amazing.
Right.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. This has been really
Sure,
great.
of
And
course.
yeah, I appreciate you spending the time to share all of that with us.
Yeah, of course.